I'm delighted to be joined by former prison officer, author, host of the Real Porridge Podcast, and raconteur supreme, Neil Samworth. Neil, thanks a million for coming on the show this evening. And as you introduce every episode of your fantastic podcast, Real Porridge, how do?
Fantastic introduction. Thank you very much. And the pleasure's all mine, mate.
I'd also like to thank you. I'd like to thank you for being so approachable as well from day one, from the first message I plucked up the courage to write you on Twitter. You're very approachable, really nice to deal with. And you are exactly as you're like in the movies. So that's good. So,
Crack on, mate. I'm looking forward to it.
Great stuff. So before we get stuck into it, I see you've set the scene very nicely there. You're mirroring what I have with the log fire, So I hope you get. I hope you don't get burned by it. But so we'll just do a cheers.
The thing is, innit, when you meet people, you want a nice informal chat, nice and comfortable, and you want people, to get on board, don't you, and get on side. Yeah. So it's all good. I've done that for you, mate. No expense. Cheers, man. No,
you're the first person who's done that, so fair dues. Great stuff. So what we're going to do is, suppose, the usual. If you get your water out there, or you're on the juice, is it? What you're on the juice?
I'll get me water.
You have to water. Yeah, right in the water. He's taking a break from caffeine. I'm on the.
I definitely am.
Cheers. Always, and cheers and good health to you, Sam. And
I'm back to you, mate.
I hope it won't be the last time we'll be chatting.
Cheers, Padraig. Am I pronouncing that right?
It's Padraig, but you can call me anything early in the morning, Sam. I suppose I was going to have a bowl of porridge nearby for as the cheers, but I said I'd leave it off. You've been on so many famous podcasts recently, Sam, over the last year. Like, you've been on Sean Atwood, you've been on James English, you've been on Billy Moore. So it's great. It's great. I'm privileged that you've taken time out to be on my own when I just started it off 2 months ago. So that's very kind of you. Very generous of your time.
I'm happy to chat anytime, mate.
Yeah. You played a very big role on my Christmas Day as well, by the way, when you're on the James English Christmas special. So as I like to say as well, you deserve a medal for patience for the amount of times you're interrupted by Marvin Harper in that interview as well. So fair play to you. I was literally like, let the guy finish, But anyway, it was a very good interview. It could have been a bit better if you were actually allowed to speak, But anyway, so you started off my Christmas Day very well. So thanks for that.
Good.
So Sam, we'll just take it back to the very beginning there. Could you maybe give us a bit of background about your childhood and how things were like for you growing up?
Okay, so, single parent family. Mum brought us up. My dad, call him Tony, don't call him Dad. For me, a dad is somebody who's there, or anybody who looks after a kid. Yeah, whether it parent, got whatever. So he was gone by the time I was 2, so brought up by my mum. We were very privileged. We didn't have a lot, but we had like a loving childhood. My nan played a big part, and we were brought up, in a time when it was all about manners, being respectful of your elders, saying your please and thank yous and things like that, which, it had a big impact on my life, and that's how I've always treated people. That's treated people. Some people can't understand what I'm saying when I say that.
Yorkshire, yeah.
So, didn't particularly like school. Last couple of years, hung in there because of rugby. When we had careers, as a lesson, which we did then, it was either a choice of engineering or joining army, pretty much. I went into engineering, 23 years. Did a lot of different jobs, dangerous jobs, dirty jobs. And then a bit of a loss round about millennium. I had a friend who were in prison service, and away you go. That's pretty much what happened.
Was a dirty job you referred to there your time as a masseuse? Only joking.
Cheeky. No, well, you see, people, when I tell people that, they're always surprised because they look at you but you know, around about 1998, I was bouncing. I was teaching aromatherapy in the community. You know, people look at me. I'd turn up in the community to a local college. There'd be 40 lasses, all wanting to do a 12-week aromatherapy course. And yours truly turns up, same questions all the time. But I also have my own massage business, sports massage and the like. So it's not first impressions count, but people do look at you and make judgments, don't they, before you speak and before they get to know you.
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you what, being a male masseur where 99% of my clients were female was a tough gig. You know, you've got ladies of all ages coming into the salon for massages. Got to be respectful. You have to understand that, you know, it could be embarrassing. A lot of them didn't realise it just used to say Sam on the leaflets. They thought they were coming to a female masseuse.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite challenging, but I got on well. I was well liked, got a lot of repeat custom. So it's quite a challenging time, like.
I'm sure you weren't asked for extras too often either, like, you know. So.
Once. And that was from one of my very few male clients, believe it or believe it not.
Yeah. I partly guessed that was the situation. Yeah.
You might well laugh.
Yeah. No, and in fairness, like that was like my wife actually did a spell as a masseuse as well, and obviously there was stigmas attached to the job, as in people ringing up. You know, you can imagine the type of questions should be asked on the phone and that, like, you know. So the genuine people who actually want massages at times were lower than the average number of people ringing in. So I have a lot of respect for people who do that job. Like, it's
a tough gig. The thing is, as a male as well, what you have to remember, you might do 100 good massages, yeah. You make one mistake, do something wrong, boom, that's your reputation in tatters. So you have to be the ultimate professional, like. So
be careful again.
Yeah, definitely.
You liked a bit of rugby.
Rugby kept me on straight and narrow, mate. Been talking to a lad today that I used to lock up, and we were talking about crime and where you go when you're younger. And the more I think, the more times I could have been in trouble. Not serious things or anything like that, but I could have definitely been on a different path. But rugby definitely kept me on straight and narrow. It was a focus. You know, it allowed me to get rid of my aggression and that when I was younger. So yeah, it was a really good thing.
Great stuff. What makes your journey to be a prison officer a bit more authentic than the average one, I would say, is that you had a few dashes yourself with the law when you were younger.
Like I say, the more I think about it, the closer I got. Quite a lot of fighting in my youth. Not like gang fighting and out. I mean, at that time, sort of late teens, early 20, you go into town, like no doubt they do everywhere, have a few beers, a bit of a confrontation, a few scraps and stuff like that. But I had a lot of friends who sort of were involved in criminality. So, I did touch on it quite a lot, but I never went that route. And when you look now, like I say, every single day, I just keep thinking of more and more instances. I mean, some of the stuff I saw people locked up for, shocking. Yeah. Especially now, your charges and things like that. I wasn't fortunate. It was just a different time. And, like I said, I've been arrested, spent plenty of time in police cells and things like that. But then you used to get a caution, if you caused a disturbance. Now they call, if there's a group of you fighting, now they call it a fray, which carries a prison sentence and is far more serious than me and 4 of my mates fighting with 5 other lads. So, yeah, you used to get a caution then. 80s, you've been police cells, you've been magistrates court, you get a caution, get a fine, and away you go. So definitely.
You would have grown up, I'd imagine a large part of your teenage years were spent under Thatcher.
They were, yeah.
Yeah. I'd imagine the North, Sheffield as a city in the North. I've seen This Is England, the movie, and I've seen the TV series This Is England 86 and 88, and it left quite an impression on me, to be honest, Joe. How tough things were, and, being a Liverpool supporter and having a good connection with Liverpool. I've seen Boys in the Black stuff. We had the joke about the Oscar Hughes.
Oh, yeah.
Gives a jab and then Twitter. But they were tough times to be growing up, and I'd imagine that left its own marks as well, would you say, Thatcherism?
I remember my stepdad, he worked at Orgreave, where there was a big battle with miners and police. Thousands and thousands of people are there, loads of people arrested. So, yeah, Thatcher, my stepdad were like staunch Labour, working class, as you called it then. And it's funny now because I'm near the old pit site, Loft House Colliery, and that and Orgreave were the only things that I heard on the news. We heard them for years. It was all about the miners, all the unions, TUC and that. Redundancies, things like that. Sheffield was it massively during that time with recession, all steelworks closed. Shocking, really. But yeah, growing up, it was all about the miners and things like that. That's all I can remember my stepdad talking about on politics front. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So
the mining village, Cleethorpe, is it in Yorkshire, that was very badly affected? Have I that name?
A lot of them were these. Yorkshire Main, which was like, it was a coal seam, as it were, and, they were all pit villages and stuff like that. A lot of communities. There was a pit at Clown, which is borderline Derbyshire on outskirts of Sheffield. My friend lived there from school. I remember places like that were devastated, unemployment. I once went to Chesterfield Way. Chesterfield is in Derbyshire. Yeah? It's on outskirts of Sheffield. I sold a motorbike. So this guy said, would you come, deliver the motorbike, and then I'll take you back to Sheffield? So I did. Give me directions. We didn't have sat-navs and mobile phones then. So, you had to get a map out and have a look.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful village. Big detached houses, all brand new. All for sale. Yeah. On this big site, it must have been, 200 homes, maybe 10 that were occupied, his being one of them. And they were all miners, got made redundant, no money. A lot of them just abandoned their homes, took the furniture and left. Very sad state of affairs. And it was like that for a good few years. But obviously, the sort of age I was, it was like early teens, and then, a bit of recovery. I started in engineering when I was like sort of 17, and away you go. But definitely, Margaret Thatcher, I don't think you'd still go in a pub in Yorkshire and start chatting about that lady in a good way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Which brings us on, I suppose, to an event at the end of the decade in the 80s that happened quite near where you grew up, according to your book as well, quite near to Hillsborough.
Oh, yeah.
When, were you still living in Sheffield at that time?
Or I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends who were nurses, worked at the Northern General, where a lot of the people were taken from that, and horrendous time. Absolute tragedy. There was a lot of controversy with South Yorkshire Police. Again, well, to be fair, it's just recently, haven't they? They've had, another inquiry or whatever. I think, sadly, there'll never be an outcome. People of Liverpool will be never satisfied.
Yeah.
Again, I do remember a very, very, very good friend, how it impacted on her life, and it was tragic. So it affected thousands of people, and I don't think it was well reported and things like that.
The Scum newspaper, etc. I think you mentioned that in one of your own podcasts with
definitely.
Scum newspaper. We're going to be talking about a few Scousers you would have dealt with in the prison service in a while there. Did you think that being from Sheffield came against you with people from Liverpool and your dealings with them? Or did they associate Sheffield people with Hillsborough? Or I know obviously it was a police issue and that, but would there have been a connection made, would you say?
No, you know what? There is obviously a memorial near the ground. I pass it every time we go to Amy's mum's. No, I don't think there was nothing held against the people of Sheffield. I think South Yorkshire Police. Do you know what? I've met a lot of Scousers and still meeting a lot of Scousers and that, and no one has ever talked about that apart from it being a tragedy. They've not sort of pointed the finger or anything like that.
I think there's good connection with the Sheffield people around the ground. There's a lot of people have knocked on their doors looking to ring their family and friends in Liverpool to tell them they were okay or with worse news. So there would have been like people invited in and having tea and stuff. So I'd say that would have been positive mojo with the normal Sheffield people.
Yeah, I think at the time, what I remember the most, apart from obviously the reporting and that, which was tragic, was a number of South Yorkshire police officers, I'm not sure how many, maybe 5 or 6, got barristered up, lawyered up, and they put claims in for damages, you know, the sort of thing that is more prevalent now where, you know, people are going for claims, but there was 5 or 6 police got a massive payout. Only 5 or 6, you know, there were hundreds of coppers there, ambulance people, stewards, fans of both sides, all ferrying bodies backwards and forwards. And then, you know, 5 coppers sort of got together, and I think that smacked a lot of the time. A lot of people in Sheffield were aggrieved against them people. You know, loads of people who were there that day or watched it on the news will still be traumatized now. Yet these guys got together and got a massive payout. So
yeah, that's shocking.
Just tragic.
Speaking of football, I suppose, like from Sheffield, would you have a fondness for Sheffield Wednesday or Sheffield United, or do you have any preference?
You would ask me a question like that, would you? Right, let me tell you. In the 70s, so from the age of about 10 till I was maybe 12 or 13, my uncle, who was a lifelong Sheffield United fan, used to take me to Bramall Lane. I remember at that time, used to stand on terraces. Then it started kicking off really bad, sort of mid-70s, a lot of fighting and that, and he stopped going. So if I had to pick a team, it would be Sheffield United, so I'd be a Blade. I follow the results or whatever. I have been to a football game for, I don't know, probably 30 years or something like that.
So you weren't shedding tears when Wednesday got relegated last week then?
No, I joined in, you know, on social media, a bit of banter. A lot of my friends are Wednesdayites, a lot of my friends Unitedites, so there's the old friendly rivalry going. I'll tell you what, when I was bouncing and they used to have the Sheffield Derby, United on Wednesday, when they're in the same leagues or whatever, shocking. I'll tell you now, they were scary times then. That's probably the only time I've been really scared working as a bouncer. Sheffield was ruthless, you know, just for that one day and one evening.
Yeah.
But I had friends, really good friends, who were United on Wednesdayites, and apart from match days, they'd be best of mates. But on match days, shocking.
Yeah.
You know,
it's funny how it can tribalism, isn't it? Like, you know, it just kind of comes out.
It was honestly terrifying, mate. Town centre. I mean, just before I left Sheffield, towards the millennium, the police were on top. They had lots of people with ASBOs, banning them from the town centre and curfews.
Mm-hmm.
But previous to that, it was ruthless. I wouldn't have chose to go out on Derby Day in town. Definitely not. So, but I suppose you get that everywhere, don't you?
Yeah, it's that's one thing actually. It might be good for you to experience this when you come over to Ireland. That we have a sport called hurling. Have you heard of hurling?
Oh, I know what hurling is. I was going to ask you whether there's sort of that bitter rivalry.
No, what it is now, it's like a family. It's very family friendly. So you could be in the stand with a fan from the other team beside you. There's no crowd segregation, nothing like. There's never any problems, like, It's
it's like rugby.
Yeah. So it's but it's a great experience to see a hurling game live. Like, it is the fastest field game in the world, So that could be.
It doesn't get much publicity, does it?
No. You see, the problem is that because it's such a skillful game, there's only a handful of teams that can really play it properly and have a realistic chance of winning in All Ireland, which is like the Grand Slam or the Six Nations for hurling, like the All Ireland,
Yeah.
So, but it's a special, like the Munster hurling in particular, and hurlers is special in Croke Park as well. Rugby matches were played in Croke Park briefly when they were doing up Lansdowne Road, which is now the Aviva.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful stadium, Croke Park, 82,000 people. It's a masterpiece. Like, so could be worth checking out when you're doing your tour of Ireland in the summer, or if you coincide with the summertime, like.
Definitely.
So can you maybe give us a bit of background about how you ended up in the prison service, or what convinced you to go down that road, Sam?
I had a friend, a good friend, his cousin, who was also a friend, Kevin, been in the prison service a long time. Towards the millennium, I've been made redundant a few times, like I say. I was doing a massage, which I was struggling with business-wise. Not because I weren't good at it, it's just really difficult as a male in a female environment. The bouncing, everything else. I was working a lot of hours, no social life for not a lot of gain.
Mm-hmm.
I just fancied, I needed a change. In your life, sometimes you need something. So I started applying. HMP, the public sector, weren't employing then. So I applied directly to all the private prisons and got the chance to go and work at Forest Bank in Salford. So I commuted for 10 months. Then I moved to Manchester and spent like 18 years in Manchester. It's what I needed at the time. It was a challenge. I left all my friends, family. And pretty much for 18 years, I had very little contact with anyone. So the first 2 years were quite lonely. Worked a lot of hours. You most of your friends, I suppose, you meet in work, don't you?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a strange time, but it's something I needed, a bit of job security or whatever. So, and it,
Very good.
it was vastly different from anything that I've been done before. It was a challenge.
So Forest Bank was Forest Bank was the young offenders.
It was a young offender. We had 2 wings that were young offenders, B1 and B2, and A1 and A2, and the rest was adults. So you were working with everyone, sort of thing.
Okay. And how did you find, was it working with the younger folk compared to the middle-aged folk as time went on in your new job?
I would say it's high energy. I hadn't used that word before. I like that. It was very high energy. I think back when I was sort of 18, 19, 20, full of testosterone and fighting, all about respect, challenging one another, reputation. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of incidents, a lot of bullying. I did it for 18 months, and I was completely burnt out. I need a change. I've got friends who've worked with young offenders and juveniles for years, so that's off to them. It's a tough gig.
Your personal integrity and honour led to things going sour at Forest Bank, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I'm not sure what I was expecting. It's an environment quite unlike anything else I'd ever done. I think the best way to describe it is prison's always going to be negative. Yeah. Lots of people don't want to be there, including the staff. And have you heard of the Stanford prison experiment?
No.
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 Something to look at, a little explanation. In the 70s, this is rough, yeah? So in the 70s, or it might be in late 60s, some young psychologist type person in America decided to do a social experiment to look at human behavior. So he put an advert out for students. It was going to be paid work. He got a group of people who were going to be prison officers or guards, as they call them over there. He got a group that were going to be prisoners. And what he did, they built not a prison as such, but they built somewhere with cells. The people who were going to be the guards helped build it. And the people who were going to be prisoners, he had arrested by real police to make it authentic. And then he got a sort of prison environment with prisoners who were students and guards who were students. It was filmed, it was mic'd up, it was reviewed regularly. And the conclusion at the end of it, they had to cut it short, was if you put good people in a bad place, some will become bad. So when I started at Forest Bank, most of the staff were fantastic, but some of them went over the top. Yeah. Take things too far. Some prisoners did get beaten. I never saw any of that. What people are very good at doing is they get to know their audience. It's a popular thing that, and they do so. They'll have a look. Yeah, I'll get away with it in front of these, and they might do something, inappropriate or go over the top. And then they'll look at other people and not so much. So your integrity is important to me. I can hold my head up. I never did anything that I'm ashamed of, either private or public sector. So, but if you have a look at the Stanford prison experiment, they've actually remade the film, but there is original footage on YouTube, and it is quite shocking. Like I said, within days, people start being abusive towards the prisoners and things like that. So,
well, there was one specific incident, wasn't there, on Forest Bank, where
it was a prisoner who had been drinking hooch, which is like homebrew, very easy to make, sugar, water, fruit, sometimes use bread. Ovaltine, do you know what Ovaltine is? The bedtime drink.
Yeah.
When that was available on the canteen, they used that because it got yeast in it. Would brew up alcohol. I've seen it up to 25% in strength. This lad got drunk, came to the segregation unit, which is like the block, the choking, the punishment unit. He then went to the healthcare, and when he came round, he started smashing the place up. So we ended up being called over and moving him back to the segregation unit, where someone I worked with punched him while he was in handcuffs, and that went to investigation, and it all got a bit nasty then. People blaming each other for things and stuff like that. But 2 staff got sacked. 3 or 4 staff were given warnings. So yeah, it is a very tough gig. People are scared to stand up, and be counted. The whole whistleblowing thing, whistleblowing legislation that was brought out so that police officers who see wrongdoing are protected and the like. Never happened in the prison service. If you report someone for wrongdoing, it doesn't matter whether that person's liked or not, you're the bad one.
So I suppose to summarize, you were treated like an outcast for having the courage of your convictions and actually saying what actually happened.
Bang on. Yeah. Bang on. However, if I hadn't told the truth, some of the people, all the other people who were investigated all lied and then changed the statements. But one of my senior officers, very, how will we say it? Without the courage of his convictions, sort of attempted to blame me.
Yeah.
If I'd have said nothing, because some of the lads said, no, I didn't say anything. If I'd have said that, I'd have got sacked. I'd have been on my way, because he tried to, point the blame in my direction. Yeah. So, yeah, go on.
No, honesty is the best policy, I was just going to say.
Yeah, definitely. People don't understand that, but like I say, I know people who have come forward, who have witnessed bad things and have ended up out of the job. They've been bullied out of the job. People have turned their backs on them. Shocking. Yeah. Terrible.
Well, that's terrible to think that you were made feel like that in the job for saying what actually happened. So I suppose just to clarify, like that, you literally said what happened, that a prisoner was assaulted.
Yep. Two of my best friends at the time, I asked them, for help. I was looking for help. Give them the scenario. Do you know what? They were like, well, you need to do what you're going to do. They couldn't even, help me out, say, yeah, you need to tell it how it is. They couldn't do that. They were fearful of doing that. And I'll tell you now as well, there's prison officers now who tell me stories, who've been out of the job 15, 20 years, but are worried and don't want me to repeat them stories. So you imagine an incident happened 30 years ago. They're concerned that I might mention that now. Yeah. They're fearful of something that happened 30 years ago. How bad's that?
That's shocking, yeah. Well, first of all, fair play to you for having the balls to speak up, even though it led to a lot of awkwardness for you, and it ultimately ended up in you leaving Forest Bank.
Yeah.
And going to Strangeways.
I applied for Strangeways whilst we were there. The reason I wanted to go to public sector, it was then a lot more money, and let's face it, we all go to work for money. And I was getting that time of life. I didn't have a pension or anything like that. So I wanted some job security, a decent wage, and a pension. So, yeah, I applied. In between time, went to a kids' home, worked there 12 months, loved it. The politics around looking after kids are horrendous, terrible. There's a lot of people in them sort of jobs that, they don't even like kids. I come across them. However, I need to tell you this. So maybe a couple of months ago, I got a message from a lad called Kieran. So I read the message. Sometimes you'll get a message, you see a name, you digest the message. And he was a lad from the kids' home, 2004. When he was 11, that's when I worked with him. He sent me a message now. So he's like just coming up to, what is he, 30, 16? Yeah, he's coming up to around 30 years old. And he sent me a message thanking me for looking after him and for everything I did for him and the other kids. So that's nice.
That's lovely to hear, yeah, the fair dues. I'd imagine you probably saw, you mentioned in the book that you would have seen younger kids in Forest Bank who graduated to Strangeways.
Sadly.
Yeah. So you kind of oversaw the development in a different sense, like.
I'm now at a different level to that. So 2-2, 2-3, I worked with the young offenders. A lot of them went on to a lot of them in for minor offences then. Like I said in my book, we had we had 6 armed robbers on the wing who had the cars, the motorbikes, the young girls on their arms, that sort of thing, the kudos and everything. And a lot of the other lads looked up to him, and a lot of them lads who were on the wing at the same time went on to become armed robbers. A lot of them. So that were quite sad. One or two have been in touch. They made it, never went back. But now I'm sort of going next level now, because lads who were at Strangeways when I were there are now messaging me, and they've sort of broke that cycle and they've gone into different careers. They've got kids. The lad I saw today, first 30 years of his life in trouble, in prison, involved in criminality. He's been sort of 10 years crime free now, settled down, got a lovely missus, got a child. So although when I was at Strangeways, it is quite grim, and you sort of look at it and you don't know where to go, because these people just progress, get more violent, more criminality. But now I'm seeing people who've moved on, which is I don't know what word you'd use for it. It's just nice. It's nice to see people that have broke the cycle and are now living life, as it were, and not, they're out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm sure if you influence those people in your own way as well, you know what I mean, when you had them on the wing,
That's another interesting one. So Kieran from the kids' home, who'd have thought, like 17 years ago, I would have never thought that I'd have made an impact on them kids' life. But like he says, there's lots of lads as well who said, treating them in a decent way and speaking to people in a proper way and having the time to talk to them made a big difference. I never thought until this last 12 months, yeah, you can be nice and be a decent person, but I never thought that, I might have influenced people. Whereas now I'm seeing that, well, they're telling me, yeah, you didn't influence. You took time to talk to me, talked about where they were, criminality, about living life and things like that. So, yeah, it's
in my own job. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In my own job, I suppose in my own job, I would come across people that would have a lot of barriers up, and maybe have been used to being treated and spoken to in a different way previously. So when you're actually genuine with them and build rapport and down to earth, you'd be surprised how the shackles come off, and they're actually quite nice to deal with. And if you treat people like scum, they'll act like scum. I think that's kind of
the other thing is, I've said it's like being on stage when you're in prison. You're not acting. I don't mean that. I always tell everyone, new prison officers, lots of people message me thinking about going into the job. They watch the podcast, read the book, and it's not putting them off. What they're saying is the honesty and that, they know exactly what they're going into. But I always tell them, be yourself, try and be humble. And this respect is earned. You can't do that. You have to sort of take people as they are, give them opportunities. And then, if they cross the line or whatever, then, they blow it themselves. But, yeah, it does make a massive difference. It does make a massive difference. And I'm finding that out. And like you say yourself, people react to how you treat them.
Yeah.
Proof of the pudding is now. So many people, people who've done 30 years in prison who message me. You'll know yourself, if you're watching me vlogging or talking to people or whatever, people can see through you.
Yeah.
You are under spotlight or whatever, and they see you for exactly who you are. So I've always been the same person, pretty much when I was at school, all them different jobs in engineering, prison service, kids home, same person, just be yourself.
No, you can't be anyone else.
Well, you can't keep things up. You might be able to blag people, but,
So I mentioned the book. I mentioned you're an author earlier, Sam, and I want to put the link to your book. I have it here, Strangeways Prison Officer Story. A riveting book, a real page turner. I've read it a few times in preparation for the interview today, but it is a brilliant book, genuinely, and I've recommended it to a few of my friends as well. You saw that on Twitter. My friend Cathy really enjoyed it as well. And there's a part of that in the prologue, which I think is very relevant. The last couple of paragraphs of the prologue, and I'm just going to read that out there to kind of set the tone.
Okay.
What it was like, is most of the book is based on your experiences in Strangeways.
Yeah. So,
sorry, I should say at the start that you tell in the prologue with the story of a prisoner, Thomas Riley, and the cell fire, which we're going to ask you to tell in more detail in a second. But
okay.
Every day in prison is a story of endurance and aggression in a culture where few dare ask for help. Our jails are creaking catastrophically due to shortages of cash and genuine will for change. Unless by that you mean interference by pin pushers, box tickers, and politicians who never faced the reality of working on a prison landing in their life and with shit blue lights if they're ever asked to do so. Rage, I know all about rage. I saw plenty of it when I joined the prison service, and it's what was in me when Strangeways chewed me up and spat me out. The job will do that to you. In Britain, it's not just cells that are going up in smoke, it's the prison service itself. And until we get serious about extinguishing the flames, there's a danger they will burn out of control. So I just thought that was very profound and very well put, and a very good way to start the book.
Definitely. So you want to know about Thomas Riley?
It's just relevant with the flames as well, since we have two flames on both our screens there. So it's even more apt. Like, but
it's. I'll tell you what. I'll look at a critiques. Someone who criticised the book, which is few and far between. But somebody on social media who has set up a blog based around my book, sort of, you know, saying what a scumbag I am, writing about my experiences, and what they said was, when they're talking about like Thomas Riley and his self-harming and everything, that I judge how to deal with an incident on the amount of blood that's there or whatever. What people don't understand is, and I think this is really relevant, my story, if you went to prison, your prison story is about you, what happens to you, and maybe there'll be some crossover interactions with people. When I was in prison, your story, Thomas Riley's story, and lots of other prisoners' stories are part of my story. You know, you saw people, you get to know them really well, you know about the family life, the background, you know how to treat them. Prisoner knowledge is everything. Mm-hmm. And Thomas Riley, he was one of those, you know, he cut his throat at one point, without being too blunt about it. He was the sort of lad, if I'd have pressed an alarm bell, he was in a cell, I was outside, and he's cutting away at his throat. When he did that, there was no thought. He's not marked it up. He's not cutting here so he doesn't cut a vein or an artery. It's just him having a paddy with himself. No one had upset him. Frustration, and that's what he'd do. So if I'd have pressed an alarm bell and maybe gone in that cell, he might have got even more frantic and actually cut something and bled out. We had a conversation like we're having now. He's got his razor blade cutting his neck, and I'm sort of like, Thomas, you know, can I help you anything? What's wrong? Very matter of fact, and it's not for effect, that. And he was polite. He still called me Mr. Samworth, you know. Told me to go away. I informed the nurse, like it says in the book. She asked him, Thomas, what's up? What can we do for you? He called her by her name and told her to go away. And we told him to press his bell when he'd done, which he did. Now, somebody else, you know, if somebody been on a wing doing that, I'd have been straight in a cell. I knew that lad, and me intervening might have escalated that. As it were, you know, he had a very nasty wound, but he didn't die. Somebody else who I didn't know, if I saw somebody doing that, straight in there. So it's having that understanding and making decisions, because nobody else can make them decisions for you.
I believe he used to rub shit into his wounds as well when he used to cut.
He did. He did. He opened his arm with a razor blade down to wood. Do you know what I mean by down to the wood? There was no thought about his cutting. He cut it down to bone. He cut, you know, over the years, lots of damage. His arms were a mess, but he had horrific wounds, open wounds. And yeah, he rubbed excrement in them. He refused antibiotics. He refused any treatment. Me or they'd have got infected, sepsis now, and he'd have been dead. Him, 3 weeks later, he had 6 horrific scars, but they'd healed. So, and again, this lad is not gaining anything by doing that. That's him angry and frustrated with himself. You know, he wasn't harming me or the nurse manager. It was all at himself. And he wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't saying, move me to another prison, move me out of this cell. It's just, he'd get wound up, he'd get frustrated, start cutting. And then, yeah, like you said, rubbing shit in them, which is, you know, it's not pleasant to see. However, it is what it is, you know. It might sound very matter of fact, but that's what he did. So,
yeah, and I suppose just to summarize the story in the prologue with Cellfire,
yeah,
he was playing
when
fire
he got
starter.
Yeah, talk about a little Irish nurse in the book. She was on shift that night with me. You would have nurse on healthcare with you as an officer. One of the staff said he'd been playing up on days, had an inkling he was going to, you know, set his cell on fire. He had history. He'd done it before. We had a hose pipe. At the end of the landing, it was all coiled up in a locked cabinet, as it were. So we used to have the lights out. So in the corridor, the lights were out. So you could see in the cell, but they couldn't see you. So we had the hose pipe laid out. Early morning. People have said this before about, you know, him having the Prodigy and fire starter on. Some people have said, I made that up. Well, I have no need to make it up. You know, the fact is, this is who he was. He hadn't got fire starter on because he was going to set his cell on fire. He got it on because he used to listen to the Prodigy all the time. You know, when he was cutting himself, he'd have his stereo on, blasting out, you know, away you go. This night, fire starter on. His music had been getting louder all night anyway, like I say. When I went to his cell, there he was, facing away from me, dancing to the Prodigy, lighter, setting himself on fire. I dropped the hatch. They have a hatch on healthcare, so he can pass things in and take things out. And also he can observe people at night. You know, it's very hard to see through glass whether someone's alive and moving. Got a hose pipe, like it says, shouted his name a few times, turned round, never said a word, just soaked the cell, soaked him, soaked his radio, shut the flap, never said a word. He didn't say anything. He just stood there and took it. It all sounds very comical. At the time, though, cell fires, you know, they get your heart going. I think fire itself is frightening anyway, because once it gets going, there's no stopping it. And I left it at that and walked away. We did have interactions later on in the night. I'd give him a cup of tea. Went to his cell. He was freezing. It was winter, shaking, obviously soaked through. I give him some more bedding. I gave him a cup of tea. You know, it's very much, and away you go. It is what it is with that guy. He was at the extreme, and I did say, if you put him in a penthouse, if he come to Ireland, yeah, and he's in Dublin, in the nicest hotel, in a penthouse, if somebody pisses him off, he would be cutting himself, rubbing shit in it, and setting his room on fire. In prison, in a mental hospital, in a hotel in Dublin. That is who he was. So,
and he used to put sugar on himself as well and put himself on fire, isn't he?
He did that once before I went on there. Tracksuit bottoms, tied his laces around the bottom, 2 bags of sugar into his tracksuit. Hey up, Captain. 2 bags of sugar.
Yeah.
Set himself on fire, and like you say, sugar burns. His legs. I remember seeing him once coming out of the shower. His legs were horrendous, mate. Big piece of his calf muscle burnt away. They were all scar tissue. You know, scar tissue, if you have a bad scar, how it shrinks and it can distort things and that. His legs were horrendous. Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, there was parts of the book were quite difficult to read, to be honest. Like the guy who tried to gouge out his own eye when in spite.
Yeah.
The guy who was punching the bars of the cell that are an inch thick.
Yeah.
And their forearm are dangling down like jelly. There are parts that are quite difficult to read. So, you know.
That lad, when he come in, you're on about punching the bars and that. I weren't on that weekend. On the Friday, you could see the way he was going. He'd only been with us 2 days. Been arrested by the police. He should have, if the world worked right, he should have gone straight to a mental hospital on the emergency section. Someone should have given him an injection in his ass and knocked him out 3 days. He's with us 4 days. He totally smashed himself to bits, and then he went on an emergency section. Like, but again, it's not for effect. That is some of the things you have to deal with. Yeah, they're the extreme. Not everyone's doing that, but particularly on that healthcare health, you saw the best of people sometimes, but also not the worst of them. It's just when people are unmedicated and unwell, you know, it's just shocking.
Yeah. And obviously all this contributed to you leaving, and obviously it affects your mental health as well, which we're going to come to later in the interview.
Yeah.
One man, I suppose, that has become very well known over the last 6-7 months on YouTube and Instagram, and that is one of your ex-customers, as you refer to them as in the book, as opposed to prisoners.
Yeah.
Is Darren G.
Yeah.
I must say, I admire what he's trying to do with the Choose Life, Not a Knife.
Definitely.
I think it's very noble of him to do that. And it definitely is a lot more authentic for someone like him with his past coming out and trying to raise awareness of knife crime and that. So when Darren was in Strangeways, how did you find dealing with him? How did you find his interaction?
He was on K-Wing 2 years. Quiet lad. He didn't keep himself to himself much, but he, you know, most of the time, because he was on a remand a long time, he was a cleaner. So he was out a lot. Used to like his gym or whatever. Used to have quite intelligent conversations with him. Just kept his head down, really, and got on with his jail or whatever. So a lot of these people, when they're in prison, you know, talked about this a lot. There's easy way to do it and hard way. He just got his head down. Like 2 years is a long time to be on remand in this country. Usually you would expect maybe 12 months before going to trial or whatever. So yeah, he was on K-Wing a long time, under the radar, as it were. Just got on with his job. You could have a decent conversation with him. Liked his gym. Yeah. Very quiet.
He comes across as very intelligent in interviews and stuff as well, to be fair. Like, he's Having heard him speak about his past, it sounds absolutely horrendous, to be honest. And that's you're a product of your environment, but you know what I mean. And he had a very tough upbringing.
A lot of these lads you come across in prison have their own demons or whatever. A lot of people don't really have any help dealing with these or whatever, so it can make life quite difficult. But definitely the message he's putting out there is it's got to be a good one, especially in this climate. I don't know whether you sort of have the same media coverage. Certainly before COVID for me has covered a lot of things up, but London was just in the news all the time for stabbing, social media, crime capital of the world, more crime than New York, this sort of thing. Shocking.
Yeah.
And now, you've got young people carrying knives and stuff like that, so it's not good, is it?
There was one part which the story, I suppose, kind of shows the fear that people had of Darren G in prison was that they paid a guy to hit him with a tuna tin in a sock.
Down the bottom, yeah, they did down the bottom jail when he was on C-Wing, I think, or whatever. The thing is with these people, everyone has enemies or whatever, or particularly in prison, not necessarily, because it was Darren, but you upset someone, the wrong people or whatever, then they might not come directly to you, but they'll get someone else to, a lot of the bad assaults, when they got investigated properly, the perpetrators weren't the people who had the problem with the people they were assaulting. Somebody else had pay them.
Yeah, that's just shocking.
Yeah, the last 2 years as well, a lot of drugs in prison, a lot more incidents. A lot of people, if people are in debt, they will use that debt to get them to do their dirty work, as it were, I suppose. So, yeah, but there's a lot of connections as well in prison. In Manchester prisons, you got your various areas of Manchester and some got on, some didn't. So, a lot of that sort of the underground world, you never really get to see, or maybe you don't know what actually is going on as much as you think you do. So,
the next story I'm going to ask you to tell, you probably have it on autopilot in your head. You've been asked so much to say, but it's in relation to Darren's brother Denny, G, and the night they tried to make him move cell.
I'll tell you about that, lad. The more I've sort of looked at that incident, there is lads. I talked to an ex-gym officer. I did an interview with him, and I asked him about people and weights, Olympic weights and ever. There are very few people in prison who are problematic because of the size. Denny, always been a big lad. Again, another product of the system. Some of these guys don't get a chance to sort of get up and running in prison. But, their mentality and that makes them problematic when you have to deal with them when they kick off. People are fearful of them. But if you take a step back, as they would say, I think sometimes they are stitched up. On the whole, like when you're talking about Darren and Denny, yeah, they haven't spent their whole prison life fighting the system. I think a good example would be Charlie Bronson, who's now Charles Salvador. He's changed his name. I'm sure most people, both in Ireland and, UK as a whole, will know or have heard of Charlie Bronson.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't spent his entire prison life fighting the system. Yeah. He's been very quiet of late. However, That's what people focus on. So they never get chance to settle. The reputation is always going to precede them. And it's the same with Danny. What they need to do, quite often these people will have long periods and they need to be able to settle down, get in a prison where they get on or whatever. So on the Friday night, he was asked to move cell. He refused. He was going in a strip cell, which is a bare cell. All you've got in it is a wooden plinth, which is a bed, nothing else, no toilet, no sink. Do you know what? I'm not sure whether there's a window or not. I've never thought about that. But there is observation panels, so you keep an eye on somebody. And in the door, there's a hatch. So again, it's a secure hatch. It's not like the healthcare. It's a mechanical device that you lift up. You can put things in and pass stuff through. So in short, 11 staff in full riot gear have tried to restrain him in order to move him this cell. He destroyed the staff, not seriously injured them, but he was playing with them. His strength and his physicality are next level. Very powerful lad. So in the end, the government asked him to move into the strip cell, which he did. So he was compliant. He took some stuff in there. He shouldn't really have. A strip cell is what it says. All you would have in a strip cell is the clothes you're standing in. Anyway, he took some things in there. I was off on the Saturday. It became problematic on the Saturday during the day. So I got a phone call at home Saturday night asking me to go into the jail because they were going to do a planned intervention, which means we were going to be going in the cell in order to remove items. I believe got a lighter and he was threatening to set the cell on fire. We've already said about cell fires, they're terrifying. So 12 staff in full PPE, riot helmets, the lot have turned up. We've had a briefing about going in the cell. These are all volunteers, by the way. So I had a conversation about this incident with another member of staff who was actually involved in this incident. Because it's good sometimes to look at things from a different perspective, My take on it now, which on reflection now, looking back, and at the time, I never saw it like this. You got 12 staff. We've got a lad in a strip cell, It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's heard from that guy for hours. So what was problematic during the day, requiring intervention, you've now heard nothing. So the other member of staff has said the same as me. You've got your staff there in case it become problematic. Why would you risk his sort of health and safety and the staff's health and safety to go into a cell at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's all quiet? You've got your staff there. If you need them, you go through to morning, your staff can go off shift, no intervention, no paperwork, no one's at risk. But somebody decided at 3 o'clock that those 12 staff were going to go into that cell. Very big lad, very powerful lad. I was quite aware what we're getting ourselves into. Other people, not so much. We ended up going in the cell. Maybe 8 or 9 staff trying to hold him down. He started getting up. People have said before, 9 people on one, they aren't getting up. Well, believe me. What you have to remember is that all the people who went in that cell weren't game for what was going on. If you like, it was above their pay grade. We ended up, to cut a long story short, with 4 of us sort of in a stand-up sparring type fight with Danny. It was self-preservation. one of the lads caught him with a punch. He went down. We were on him, and then bump, we're out of the cell. It was self-preservation, like I said. 12 staff went in. It ended up 4 staff in the cell with just Danny. Quite terrifying, very powerful lad. Again, looking now, years later, there was no need for any of that at all.
Yeah.
And you have got to wonder whether he was stitched up, some people had got it in for him. And me and the other guy who was there, he's now left the job. We come to the same conclusion at the end of the day, But these things sort of go on prisoners' records as well. So now I'm looking at it, like we've said earlier in the podcast, treating people and speaking to people in a proper manner, can get a positive outcome. I look at all this incident now, and it could have none of it should have happened, really. If it had been a different set of staff in the segregation unit, I don't think they'd have wanted to move in Friday, it'd have kicked off or whatever, because a lot of people like Danny, prisoners like that, they're not problematic till people do them wrong. A lot of prisoners will get on with the jail. They won't be happy with what you throw at them or what happens to them or whatever, but they'll take it on the chin. However, if they feel they're being, treated badly, stitched up, whatever you want to call it, then they will react to that.
Yeah.
And that is what I believed happened. So, and on reflection, a lot of incidents I was involved in the prison service with different managers and staff would have ended up in no paperwork. There'd have been sort of, if you like, peaceful outcomes, if that makes sense.
But it seems like a very over-the-top reaction to go into someone's cell at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? So you understand how you react like that.
Yeah, no need. But it's when you talk to other people who are thinking exactly the same as me. But at the time, you don't see that. But looking back now, because that's what I do now, I reflect on a lot of things that happened, and they could have been managed in a different way. But at the end of the day, not everyone's like me or whatever. So
absolutely, yeah. There was a quote here I think you might enjoy. There was a journalist, fairly famous journalist in Ireland, and he got prison for grooming an underage girl, teenage girl. And by all accounts, he was trying to use his name in prison to get kind of preferential treatment.
Yeah,
which I'm sure you've come across with well-known people yourself when they were in prison. But he asked a prison officer for some privilege or whatever, and he was denied it. And he called him an uneducated turnkey. And the prison officer's response was, "I'd rather be an uneducated turnkey than an educated paedophile."
Good answer.
So, which was a good answer. I thought you might enjoy that. One of the things I suppose luckily I've never been in prison myself, or I don't know of anyone personally that has been. But one deterrent, I think, and I think most people would kind of be thinking the same, is that there would be the fear that, sexual assault and rape in the showers and all that, would be a fear. Would such fears be unfounded, would you say, or does stuff like that actually go on in your experience?
Okay. On the VP wings, vulnerable prisoners, sex offenders and the like, there is quite a lot of people who will turn tricks, as it were, do sexual favors and the like. I have come across people who have alleged sexual assault in prison. It's not as prevalent, I don't think, as in American prisons. However, it's reporting it. I remember one lad he was a big lad, powerful lad. who reported a sexual assault 3 days after an alleged rape. The problem is 3 days after, there's no evidence. You know, it might be his word against the person he was accusing or whatever. So it's very difficult to prove. I'm sure there probably is some sexual assaults that never get reported for that reason, the stigma and everything else. And you imagine, you know, having to come to an officer and sort of describe that you've been assaulted or something like that. There is assaults that have been investigated, but again, it's not, you know, it's not super prevalent or anything like that. So, but they're local jails. I mean, I have heard in long-term jails, dispersal jails and the like, that, you know, people do get into sort of relationships, long-term relationships, which is obviously different to sexual assaults. So probably stuff that happens never comes to the surface.
Well, reading the book there was a different form of sexual assault. There was spooning.
Yeah.
A guy who said that he had a phone on his person up himself when he hadn't.
Yep.
Trying to show off, and his buddies, or he's thought they were his buddies, use a spoon to try and fish out the phone, which didn't exist.
That happens a lot, or did happen a lot. That somebody thinks somebody's got drugs, big industry, tobacco now even, then that's what they'll do. You know, they will hold somebody down, go up their backside with a spoon and try and get it out. Horrendous, terrible.
Another example in the book you were saying was that one guy put a toilet brush up another one to make space for phones and drugs to widen the anus.
Yep. He basically was a lad refused to hold a phone to someone. If you're talking about that, he's not having it in your cell. He's basically up your backside. They will keep things up the backsides during the day, take them out at night usually. However, you know, a lot of people, they put that risk on somebody else. And like I said, that lad, I remember him well. Sadly, I took him to hospital on a hospital escort, you know, to have an examination for damage or the like done.
Shocking, like.
Terrible. Terrible.
So I suppose it's not that prevalent in the UK prisons, you would say, rape among prisoners.
No, I don't think it is. It's a different sort of culture to America. I'm not saying it don't happen. However, you know, I would imagine if it did, then chances of getting reported are very, very small. The lad I'm talking about who reported it after 3 days, really, it was sort of a cry for help from him, you know, tried to get him some sort of support or whatever. But again, very difficult. You know, counselling, psychological input, very difficult.
You mentioned there was a section in the prison for terrorists and political prisoners. Was there ever any Irish political prisoners, like IRA members or anything like that?
You know what? I have come across very few political prisoners, Irish political prisoners. I can't honestly think I've ever come across any IRA. We did have a couple of lads who were on the Cat A unit at Strangeways who were believed to be UDA, is it? Ultra Defence?
With the Ulster Defence Association, they'd be loyalists. Yeah.
A couple of them lads, they were in for alleged political crimes. They ended up actually getting off. You know, they were in for remand. Obviously, they were made Cat A because they would be classed as terrorists. And then quite often the case, you know, when there was no evidence or whatever, then that Cat A status went away. Mad Dog Adair had his son in Forest Bank. He was a young offender, 21 years old. I've talked about him before when I was on James English, I think, and some of the Scottish followers said he actually died in Scotland. He OD'd.
Yeah.
He was a cracking lad at Forest Banking. Intelligent lad. He was a good cleaner, model prison, really. But yeah, you tend not to, in the 80s and that, Whitemore, Mafia, IRA type prisoners and the like, but not so much now. Not that I've come across anyway.
I suppose the years you were in Strangeways, it was just after the Good Friday Agreement, so things had calmed down a bit.
Well, yeah. Obviously not as many people in prison and the like, so yeah, definitely.
I'm going to reference now a man that you referenced yourself in the book as one of Strangeways' former prisoners, and was one former Irish political prisoner called Brendan Behan, who spent a bit of time there in 1947 trying to break out an inmate who was also in Strangeways at the time, and he got caught.
Yeah.
But he had he wrote a book called Borstal Boy. So at 16, he was sent over by the IRA to blow up Liverpool docks. And he got caught before he could lay the dynamite. And in his book, in the very first chapter, the police broke into the lodging house he was staying in, like a B&B. And they broke into his room and they said, "Have you got a gun, Paddy?" And he said, "If I had a gun, you wouldn't have come in that door so shagging easy." Yeah. Which made me laugh. But he was in prison. There was an Irish prison officer. There was a prison officer who was from the south, but was non-Republican. I suppose he was trying to prove to the other officers that he wasn't Republican himself, because they're in England, like. And I suppose he was slagging Brendan Behan for being in the IRA, or he was kind of trying to demean him, like, you know. And it was like, they said, you know, he was saying, "We didn't do half enough of Ian during the Troubles." And Brendan Behan said, "Well, they chased you out of it anyway. You haven't stopped running since, like, you know, the fact that to immigrate." So that obviously got your man's back up. And he was on about the abuse that, a lot of abuse he was kind of mentioning. He got kind of a lot of anti-Irish stuff, like, "You Irish this, you mix this, you Paddy," whatever.
Yeah.
And Brendan Behan said to him, "I don't know if that sort of abuse is provided for in the regulations, but I'm pretty sure that you'll have to feed me as per the regulations. So can I order something in from outside, or are you going to cook me something, like, you know?" And they kind of they rubbed them up the wrong way. Like.
I think, but you know what you're talking about then. I started speaking to a lot of people who did a lot of time in the service, way more than me, and finished before me, about the good old days. And I always thought back then, you know, when they had the peak caps and everything, it was a proper disciplined service. Or that's the impression that people always give me. But the people I'm talking to now sort of say not at all, you know, it was quite unruly. Yeah, they had the uniform sort of thing, the polished boots, the peak caps, the chains and everything. But he said, no, it was just unruly. It was not sort of a professional job or whatever. I don't know. It's I do talk to some lads who are in. You'll have to tell me the old Victorian jail that's on the outskirts of Dublin. Mountjoy.
Mountjoy,
yeah. There's some lads from there, and the job in Ireland is still quite a bit different from the job over here, I believe. You know, it's probably more civilized, even if that's the word to use. You know, they've still got some sort of discipline or whatever. Whereas compared to the prison service over here now, at this moment in time, you know, I don't know where we are. We're heading towards sort of third world type prison system, yeah. Big turnover of staff. They've been banged up during the pandemic. They were banged up before the pandemic. and I don't see a lot changing when the rest of the country goes back to normal. So it's a pretty sad state of affairs, really.
I actually had an uncle who worked in Cork prison as a prison officer. My uncle Willie, so he has a few stories read about some of the characters he would have dealt with. But
I have no doubt. Yeah.
So big shout out to Willie as well if you're watching. But Brendan Behan wrote a play set in prison called The Queer Fella. But that's not a homophobic slur. It's actually a title that was reserved for a guy who was about to be hanged the next day in prison.
Oh, yeah.
The Queer Fella. And basically it's about the lead up to a hanging and just the other prisoners and the other prison officers' feelings and the morality behind it. And it is quite an engaging play, and it's on YouTube as well, the film. But there's a song from that which I'm going to sing, add a bit of culture to the podcast. It's called The Old Triangle. And it was sung by Lou Kelly and the Dubliners. Shane McGowan also sang it as part of one of the song for the Pogues as well. So I don't know if you've heard it or not, but we'll give it a bar anyway, and you might be able to relate to some of it, possibly, or maybe not. But
fire away.
We'll give it a go. A hungry feeling came o'er me stealing. All the mice were squealing in my prison cell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. To begin the morning, the screw was bawling, get up, you bowsy, and clean up your cell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. The lag was sleeping, and wee Gussie was peeping, as I lay there weeping for my gal Sal. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. We like this verse now. Up in the female prison, there are 70 women, and among them I wish I did dwell. Then the old triangle could go jingle, jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. All along the banks of the Royal Canal. There we go.
Oh my word. Have you practiced that?
No, first time singing today. Like
you sounded very Irish. You have that melody type thing going on.
Good. So you mentioned a couple of famous guests there, or sorry, guests.
Yep.
A couple of famous prisoners you would have had. So they were guests, I suppose, at the time, but one of those was Harold Shipman, the serial killer from Manchester. And
he was before my time, that guy.
Yeah.
However, a lot of the nursing staff that I would later work with dealt with him at the time. And irrespective of the crimes, you'll have seen me say before, you know, you just treat people how you find them. Some people are obnoxious and it don't matter how you treat them or whatever, they're just not nice people. And he was one of them. He basically looked down at everyone, talked down to the nursing staff. He was not a nice person at all. So
Joey Barton was another man you had the privilege of meeting.
Yeah.
The Barticumas. What was he like?
He wasn't on my wing. He was on the drug-free wing, which is not really a thing, a drug-free wing. There was some outside interventions going on there. He was afforded special privileges. The fact he was a footballer, for me, should make no difference to a prison sentence, but he was given a job on the wing very quick. He actually ended up being the gym orderly in the main gym. That has got to be the number one job in the prison, yeah? Very privileged. You get taken over in the morning, all day over there, have your dinner over there, train when you want, that sort of thing. He was given that job. So there was some outside intervention, somebody pulling the strings. Like I said, for me, footballer, singer, come off the streets, no different, should all be treated same. He wasn't. He used to bounce about the place and that, you know, like he was something special. But like I say, he got treated special, which will probably piss people off. He wouldn't have been if it, you know, for me. But again, it's just what it is. However, we've had other, you know, sort of minor celebrities or whatever they're like, who've just come in and done the time. Bez from the Happy Mondays. Remember seeing him walking about the jail, everyone would be shouting out to him. You know, he just come in, no special privileges, cracked on with his jail or whatever. So
Ian Brown as well from the Stone Roses.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't have known him from Adam Me. He was on H-Wing. He was a cleaner on there. Somebody pointed out to me, like I say, I ain't even got a clue who he was. So very unassuming, under the radar, just cracked on, as it were.
So Sam, listen, it's been brilliant covering that topics with you. Next week on part 2, we're going to go into a bit more detail, some more stories within the prison service itself, and I suppose the circumstances which led to you becoming further disillusioned with the prison service, how you ended up leaving it, and your journey since then, which is just beginning.
Sweet.
Fantastic podcast, Real Porridge Podcast. I'm going to put the link for it in the channel and to check out Sam's stories. What I really like about your videos as well, Sam, is like a lot of them are filmed out in the countryside with your dog Stephen, and you're literally just there. Like, I'm just thinking, if anyone walked past you, walking the dog, I think they get a surprise. Like, you're there, like talking to the camera about prison stories and stuff, and it's unique, it's novel, it's brilliant. You know, I really enjoy.
Thank you.
And so join us next time for part 2 of Sam's interview here on the Real Porridge Podcast. Good night. God bless.